This week on Snark Squad Pod, we are joined by Jenny Trout and Sam from Thoughts on Tomes to discuss the Halloween episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Welcome back to Snark Squad Pod. I am your host, Nicole Sweeney, and I am joined, as always, by my co-hosts.
Hi, I'm Marines, and we have here with us today two special guests, Jenny Trout and Samantha Lane. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
I'm Jenny Trout, and I run a long-running Buffy recap on my blog, jennytrout.com. I have a new serial that's going to be debuting on Radish on the 23rd. So then it's already debuted on Radish. It's called Nightmare Born, and it's on the Radish app. And I think that's what I've got going on.
That's exciting. Congratulations on that.
And I'm Sam from the YouTube channel Thoughts on Tomes, where I talk about books and occasionally other media things, and Buffy is one of my lifelong obsessions. So whenever I get with the SnarkSquad girls, I immediately have to start talking about it. So this is very on brand.
True to life, Sam and I were just together this weekend, and we had at least one Spike conversation, so no exaggerations.
Inevitable. It has to happen. So they are both here joining us to have this Buffy conversation, partially because they have such strong Buffy cred, but also because it is Halloween, and we decided this would be a really fun time for us to revisit Buffy. Many people who are longtime readers of the blog know that we also recapped every episode of Buffy, and it was kind of a staple of the site for a really long time. And I don't know, we've always been trying to come up with different ways to revisit Buffy for Snark Squad stuff, and this seemed like a good opportunity. So we watched and are discussing the 3 Halloween episodes of Buffy. So that's season 2's Halloween, season 4, Fear Itself, and then in season 6, All the Way. And I am going to pass it back to Sam now to give us a plot synopsis of Halloween. So that's season 2.
I am nervous but excited because I've never done a synopsis on the podcast. So I'm just this is exciting. So Halloween is occurring in season 2, and this is the first time we get introduced to the lore around Halloween in the Buffy universe, because there was not a previous Halloween themed episode, but you find out that Halloween is supposed to be when all of the supernatural takes time off. So everyone's thinking it's not going to be a very busy time. But at the beginning of the episode, this is when Buffy and Angel are still kind of deciding that they're about to actually date. They're in this weird in-between phase. She ends up having to show up late to a date, and she's just feeling very insecure about her and Angel's budding relationship. So her and Willow towards the beginning of the episode start talking about what type of woman Angel might have been into when he was alive hundreds of years ago. And she really gets in her head this idea of this 18th century woman, blah blah blah. So Halloween's coming up. Principal Snyder at this point, one of the many principals that you end up seeing on the show, but probably the worst one, even worse than the demon one. He ropes all of the Scooby Squad into supervising kids, which doesn't really make sense because he thinks they're all delinquents. But anyway, so he ropes them into supervising kids trick-or-treating. So that's kind of what the plot's going to end up being, them taking these kids out. So they all end up going to Ethan's costume shop, this new costume shop that shows up right before Halloween. Not weird at all, guys. So they end up going there to shop, and obviously something's gonna happen with that. But Buffy sees this beautiful bright pink, which is not in theme for the era that she wants anyway, 18th century gown, and she's I must have it. And of course Ethan lures her into taking it. She needs to have it, blah blah blah. So she ends up being this 18th century lady. Xander ends up being an army dude, gets army fatigues, and Willow ends up being a ghost, but she also buys, I don't remember how this happens, but she ends up with this almost clubber costume. I don't know what she was supposed to be.
I am still not clear on what Willow was supposed to be in that costume.
Yeah, they imply hooker, but they don't say it. And I don't really know why she was even convinced to be that. Yeah, it's kind of all over the place. So Willow ends up later when they're getting dressed, Willow ends up putting on her like hooker costume, but then gets nervous, even though she looks like a total babe, and puts her like, you know, ghost costume that's completely covering her on, and that's that. And then you see Ethan doing this spell up to like a chaos god, so that basically everyone turns into their costume like in the middle of trick-or-treating, and that ends up being the big problem because obviously Buffy doesn't know that she's Buffy and is completely useless like for the entire night, and is scared of everything. So Xander's like a soldier, and Willow turns into an actual ghost, but she's walking around in her hooker costume instead and can like walk through walls and stuff. Cordelia shows up at some point.
They learned that Cordelia bought her costume from somewhere else, and she's still herself.
Exactly, because Cordelia was dressed up as a cat, but she didn't turn into a cat, which is like great. So they find out that's how they make the connection. Thank you, because I was like, why was that important? Because Cordelia is being annoying the whole episode and trying to like get with Angel, which is just like, Cordelia, stop, especially knowing later things about Cordelia. Whatever. Yeah, that's when they find out that there's another costume shop and that the new costume shop might be shady. Willow goes and tells Giles this. Giles is like, Ethan? Because he has this like old friend that is Ethan who's bad, and he like shows up and finds out it's exactly that old friend. So while everyone is running from like the terrors outside, and eventually like Spike with a gang of mostly children apparently that turned into demons, like I don't know why he's like taking the kids around like that are like not actually demons, whatever. So Spike's like, Buffy's out there, you know, harmless, and now I'm gonna go kill her, like whatever. So they're running from him. Angel shows up at some point and is like, what the heck's wrong with Buffy? And no one knows what's going on. Giles goes, beats up Ethan because Giles pulls that like badass like ripper thing out of thin air, and finds out that he can break the statue to reverse the spell. So right in the middle of Spike doing the like longest kill attempt on Buffy, like he's really like savoring the moment. I'm like, Spike, this is why you fail literally every time, because like you have this opportunity. Like it's literally 30 seconds of her like whimpering and him like going in for the kill. It's ridiculous. So, and then in the middle of that, everything breaks. And she comes back and she's like, hi, honey, I'm home. And she like kicks him around a bit, but then lets him get away. Like they also just like drag that whole like, you know, typical big bad thing where like you can end all these big bads way sooner and you don't. So he like
somebody should have died. That fight
like,
should have
honestly,
like one of the two of them should have died.
Honestly,
for sure.
Like it's ridiculous. So yeah, he stumbles away. Everything's fine. And then at the end, Angel and Buffy are in her room and she's like, admits that she was dressing to impress him, and he's like, I didn't even like the women back then, very much like, you're not like other girls, blah blah blah, like this kind of thing. But it is very like cute because I do love like early on Bangel, and that's that. And then Giles returns to the store and finds a note from Ethan being like, see you soon, because Ethan comes back as like a mini big bad like a few times I feel like throughout the show. And that's that.
I like that you're like, I think I got everything, because my synopsis is going to leave about half of the episode out.
I just feel very passionately about the Halloween episode, and I feel like everything's important, so I had to leave it
in. All right. Well, Jenny, tell the good people about Fear Itself from season 4.
So, Fear Itself is actually not just one of my favorite Buffy Halloween episodes, but it's probably in my top 10 all-time favorite Buffy episodes. Probably just because it's self-contained and it's in the middle of a season that's not super great. But what happens is that Buffy is trying to get over this thing with the guy who shall not be named. He's just awful. He used her and threw her away, and she was too trusting and naive, and her heart is broken. And her friends want to go to this Halloween party at the house from American Horror Story, from the Murder House season. It's the same house. It's the same house. And so, which right there, I mean, granted, they have not seen American Horror Story, so they didn't know not to go in there. But now every time I watch
they should
it,
have
I'm
known.
Like,
yeah,
I'm like, you're going to die in there. They go, and Oz was there to set up this the sound system for these frat guys, and the frat guys have this old book, and they're like painting these scary decorations and doing all the Halloween stuff, and one of them is painting this like giant sigil on the floor in the attic, and of course this doesn't ring any alarm bells for like Oz and Xander. They're like, oh, where'd you get this? Oh, out of some old book. Like that should have been like a red flag immediately. They should have been like, whoa, we live in Sunnydale. Have you like not walked around town. And so, but it happens, and Oz cuts himself, and his werewolf blood splashes all over the sigil. And I don't know if it just needed some blood or if it needed specifically werewolf blood, but either way, it activates the thing, and it turns the house into this horrible thing where everybody who shows up at the party are like taunted by their own fears and their worst fears and all of that stuff. Anya's supposed to go to the party. When she gets there late, she doesn't see any of the main characters. They're the Scooby Gang there. She can't get in because there's no door. She's like, oh no, Xander's in trouble. She busts in on Giles, and Giles has gone like all out for American Halloween in a way that I feel like was influenced more by being unemployed than any sort of enthusiasm for the holiday. Because it's like he never showed any before, and suddenly he's wearing like this super like stereotypical like a serape and a sombrero, like bad choice, Giles, and he's just kind of chilling out and eating a bunch of candy. And Anya runs in and she's like, Xander's in trouble. You have to help. You have to come save Xander. And they go, and Giles very badassly cuts into the house with a chainsaw and saves everybody. And then it's like, heavily implied that Xander is his worst fear is Giles with a chainsaw, which is probably one of my favorite scenes ever. And then the fear demon, they've got to the fear demon that's been summoned by the sigil is behind all of this. And so Giles is reading from this book and says, destroying the mark of Gaknar, because Gaknar is the demon, destroying the mark of Gaknar. And she's like, oh, okay, I'll destroy it. Basically doesn't listen to the rest of him. And she kicks through the sigil or whatever. And he's like, well, summon him immediately. So here comes this fear demon. And he turns out to be about the size of a Star Wars action figure. And it's just very humorous, and the episode is very dark up until that point, and it takes this hilarious turn. So you get all of the stuff about their insecurities, like Oz is afraid of hurting Willow and hurting people when he becomes a werewolf, so the house makes him become a werewolf. Willow's afraid of Oz abandoning her, foreshadowing.
Stop.
Then Xander thinks nobody can see him and nobody remembers him because he's a townie and they're all off at college and he's living in his parents' basement. And Buffy's big fear is that she's truly alone, because it's always her big fear, is that she's truly alone and nobody, can help her or anything. So all of these horrible things that the demon made them experience, when it's revealed that the demon is in fact 4 inches tall, it really lightens up the episode a lot. And then, of course, at the end, Giles translates the book and it shows where it says, Gaknar is labeled as being actual size.
And that just leaves, after those two, Mari, you get the extreme joy of giving us a plot synopsis for season 6's All the Way.
Season 6 is my least favorite season of all of them, so this is great. Also, the entire episode was just a reminder. It was right before all of my least favorite storylines started, so to see them right at the beginning was really interesting. But in this one, it's Halloween again, and everybody makes a point to be like, Halloween, nothing happens on Halloween, except for the last 2 times that something happened on Halloween. So this time they are working in the magic shop, and everybody's kind of busy because it's the rush before Halloween, and Spike is in the basement stealing stuff. I don't know. And they talk about maybe patrolling, but that's when they first figure out that maybe they don't have to because nothing happens on Halloween. Meanwhile, we get a really scary edit of an old guy in town. Basically, he's got a knife and Pop Goes the Weasel is playing. So you're like, wow, this old man is really scary. We don't know why they're doing that to this old man yet, but we'll get back to him later. Back at the magic box, Xander decides to announce to everybody that he and Anya are engaged. And it seems like everybody's a little taken aback. There's a variety of reactions there. But they decide to throw an impromptu engagement party and all go back to the Summers home to have a little bit of a party. Meanwhile, Xander's anxiety about being engaged and marriage in the future kind of ratchets up throughout the whole episode as people talk to him about buying a home and kids and starting a family. And you can already start to see all of his anxieties about this relationship just come full force. Also, Tara and Willow are not in a great spot because Willow is starting to abuse magic and use it like every possible instance that she can, which Tara is trying to warn her against that and show her, explain to her why this isn't necessarily a good thing, but Willow she's not listening. Dawn wants to go out and she tells Buffy that she's going to go sleep over at her friend Janice's house, Amber Tamblyn, weirdly. And so Buffy isn't sure what to do, but she just ends up letting Dawn go. And it turns out that Dawn and Janice were lying to their respective guardians, and they're going to go out and do teenager-y things on Halloween. They meet up with two boys, and they're vandalizing homes and giggling over boy stuff, and then they finally go visit that old man with the creepy edit. And turns out the old man, I mean, maybe he's creepy, but not like killer creepy. The real killers here are the two teenage boys that are out with Dawn, who turn out to be vampires. So Dawn's kind of in a precarious situation because she goes out to like make out point, whatever, with this guy, and the guy really just wants to bite her and eat her. Meanwhile, Giles figures out that Dawn isn't where she's supposed to be, so he deploys the troops to all go get out there and find Dawn. Buffy and Spike are already kind of patrolling because some weird things have been happening in the town. It's all these vampires that are acting out. They find Dawn. It ends up being like a big group of vampires, so there's like a big fight scene, and they manage to dust them all. In the middle of the fight, Dawn has this moment where she gets cornered again by the vampire boy, and you can tell it's her first kiss happened with him, and he keeps telling her how much he likes her and how special she is, and you can just see it like feeding into her insecurities as well. But she has to make a really tough decision, and she ends up having to stake her first kiss / vampire, and she has many feelings about it. And then they all return home, and Buffy leaves the job of having a talk with Dawn to Giles, and she's like, bye, good night, see you later. So you can see her struggles with parenting kind of throughout this episode as well. And then we watch as Tara and Willow go to bed, and Tara's still very upset with Willow, and at the final moments of the episode, Willow says a forgetting spell, and she makes Tara forget that she's upset with her, and then they just cuddle and go to sleep, and it's awful to watch.
Yeah, like that was a really rough note to end the sequence on, too. So normally this is where we would do like sort of a round of did you like this? But that seems a little we've gathered here today because we all have strong feelings about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. We did say before recording, we did describe this as the good one, the better one, and the other one. I think that's probably like a universally shared opinion. I don't know. Sam maybe has a different opinion.
Oh yeah, I do. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Let's start there then.
Oh, okay. I'll just lead since I'm the one that has a different opinion. I really like Fear Itself. Like, I think it's like a really close second to Halloween. But the reason I love Halloween like so much is because season 2 is my favorite season. Like, it just gives me like the warm fuzzies. I can literally, like I said, I can quote like almost the whole episode. Like, I was watching this in Mari's presence, and I was telling her that I could quote things, and she would hear me like say the lines as I was watching it. Like, I mean, it was gross. So yeah, I think that's the reason that it just like I love it so much, even though there's things in it that I'm just like, okay, Buffy's being like kind of a dumb teenage girl and being like, oh, he doesn't, like he wouldn't like me if I was me, and like all this kind of stuff.
That's so obvious. Much part of her charm, though. Like,
definitely.
The fact that she is also ultimately still a teenage girl.
Yes. It just gives me the warm fuzzy feelings because it's like, yes, horrible things happen in season 2, but like when you see the later seasons, you're just like, things get so bad that it's just like, oh look, this is like not that big of a deal.
Right. Remember how sweet and innocent they were?
Yes, yeah. So it just makes me really happy, and I think I have just like the nostalgia bug for it. I do think that the themes explored in Fear Itself, as far as like their greatest fears and what they are and everything, is really cool as like from a narrative perspective. But I really just like the like connections, I don't know, that Halloween like has, and it just makes me happy. And then obviously we all agree that the season 6 episode is just complete filler garbage. What I do love about the season 6 episode, because I have mixed feelings about season 6 as a season, but it foreshadows for a lot of my favorite episodes in season 6, like Once More with Feeling and Tabula Rasa and stuff like that, which are coming up shortly after this.
Right.
So that is kind of like, oh, okay, like the good stuff for me is coming. But that episode's just like, wow, out of all the episodes that you've had for, the 2 other ones that you've had for Halloween that were really good episodes, you just throw together like a vampire gang. Like, honestly, how dare you? Like, you just wasted. Like, I am so offended. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, that's fair. It's interesting too, though, the way in which they are, like, they represent sort of things about the larger seasons. Like we watched 3 episodes for this conversation, but in a lot of ways talking about those individual episodes inevitably is talking about those seasons too. So like, to the degree that Fear itself is a fantastic episode, there's like, I don't know, a lot that is emblematic of season 4. Season 4 has some really fantastic episodes on their own, but ultimately is like a whatever season. And then season 6, the complicated mess that was season 6. So yeah, I think it's interesting the way in which, like, checking back in with the Scooby Gang basically at 2-year intervals for this was also just a really weird and interesting experience to watch them. 2 years later, I know all of this has happened in the the span between these respective Halloween episodes, and this was an interesting way to go through the series.
Definitely. Yeah. I watched them backwards as well. I started with the season 6 trash episode because I was like, I'm not ending with that.
Yeah,
like,
that's
I refused.
Smart.
Yeah, it was a really good call. But that's what was fun for me too, because I had a similar experience in reverse where I was seeing, like, especially like the Willow themes were just fun because obviously in season 6 she's doing all of the like magic addict stuff. In season 4 she's really unsure of her magic, and her magic, that's one of her fears too, is her magic kind of going against her and all this kind of stuff. And then in season 2 she's not even really dabbling in it at this point. It's not until the end of that season that it happens. So seeing like her evolution was the one that I noticed the most with watching these 3, which was really fun.
If you ask me to compare seasons 2, 4, and 6, absolutely season 2 is my favorite out of those 3. So it's really interesting that you put it in that context, even though I think my edge still goes to Fear itself, just because it feels more of a standalone episode to me. Like, it's one that you could put on and enjoy anytime. I feel like a little bit more than Halloween, but it was really interesting to just check in on these seasons and where they were, and all of these little pieces that weren't even that relevant in the episode that you were kind of flashed, and I just had like these waves of feelings. So you get to see, like you mentioned, Spike and Drew very briefly in Halloween. Riley shows up in Fear itself, and I was like, oh my god. Like, you talk about completely like blocking it from my brain. But not only Riley, like the Initiative is like stalking around town too, which was awful. I hated the Initiative. So and then, as much as like All the Way is my least favorite of these 3, I didn't think it was that bad. Like, it's definitely not like one of my favorite episodes, but I do have a soft spot for Dawn.
I was just gonna say that. I was like, it's because you like Dawn.
I do. That precious baby, and all of her trauma being really, really shown here in that episode. So it wasn't like terrible for me, just not my favorite, and definitely not one I'm gonna be like, let me turn it on and watch for some fun. Oh, I know, All the Way. It's never gonna happen.
With All the Way, like, I'm not a big fan of season 6. I think that season 6 is like season 6 and season 4. I think are very similar for me because of the way that season 6 is a bad season with some good episodes, and season 4 is a season with some good episodes. But All the Way, I feel like I like Dawn too. And I do think sometimes narratively she was given the short end of the stick, because they really made, like, when you're looking at All the Way, I think at that point, isn't Dawn like the same age that all the Scoobies were in the first season? Or she's very close.
I think she's like a year younger.
Yeah, she's a freshman in high school.
Yeah, so, you're looking at that and you're going, okay, she's written so much younger. than they ever were. They were given, like, when Dawn does something, the attitude, especially in this episode, is almost like, oh, she did this stupid thing because she's young. And that never seemed to be the way that things were handled when we were watching, like, the Scoobies go through it. And I feel like this is one episode where she actually gets to be an age-appropriate teenager and do age-appropriate teenage things. And that makes me like All the Way a little bit more. But yeah, it's definitely my least favorite out of the three.
So speaking of Dawn and her getting to do age-appropriate teenage things, the ending, even before, so obviously the Willow, the end was like, you know, heartbreaking and just miserable to watch. I think that is definitely something that it sits even grosser in my feelings. Like, it's not one of those things that's like, like the more time that I have had to think about it, the more I'm like, ooh, no. But even before we get to that moment, we have the bit where Buffy kind of shirks any sort of responsibility as Dawn's guardian at a moment where she had a really good opportunity to like step up as Dawn's big sister. It's just, I don't know, the fact that Dawn's sort of last big thing in the episode is her, you know, staking the boy who was her first kiss and, you know, like crying in the woods, basically, which is a bizarre circumstance that only Buffy could actually understand, but Buffy is just like so deep in her own stuff that she doesn't have the bandwidth to be there for her, and it's just, yeah, it's all around really difficult and like painful to watch and for genuine narrative reasons, not for like it's painful to watch because it's just bad, but like it's painful to watch these characters who I care so much about hurting each other.
You know, that's kind of like frustrating to me that like Buffy, of all people, should know what she was going through, what Dawn was going through, having to, you know, stake this guy. And yeah, it was not like on the Angel true love forever,
right,
you know, level, but it still was something that like Buffy can go, hey, believe me, I know what's going on. And she was unable to, and that sucks. But at the same time, like, because I am such a Giles fangirl, I look at Buffy saying to, you know, Giles, like, you know, can you handle this or whatever, as if we remember in season 2 when Angel went evil and they're in the car and Buffy says, you know, you must be so disappointed in me or whatever. And he gives her that talk about like, no, I respect you and this is not going to, you know, change stuff. And it's this really good moment. I've always kind of felt with All the Way that when she does that, it's like, I'm handing this over to you because you did such a good job when this happened to me. So I don't know. I'm a Giles fangirl,
yeah,
so I could
no,
see
I like that. I enjoy that. I appreciate that.
In the single episode, it's you can see it there, but you know, without being like deep in the mires of season 6, it was kind of easy for me to forget that a big theme and a big reason that season 6 gets so dark is because Buffy is dealing with her, you know, post back from heaven depression. Right. And so she's like not in a good place mentally. Like, I was even looking back at our recaps of these episodes, and at one point Buffy like chuckles and we go on for about a paragraph about how long it had been since we had seen Buffy like laugh. So this is like deep in the time where she is not doing well. And so to see this episode isolated and think about all of the ways that Buffy could have done better for her sister, like, yes, all of that is true, but also Buffy is in a really, really bad place here.
Right.
And,
right.
So, and that's where her story goes from this point on. And so I feel for both of them and for, you know, and it is true, like for all of the responsibility that she could have as her guardian, there was a big sister moment there as well. And, she missed it completely. And even that moment where she, you know, Dawn points it out to her is like, you fell in love with a vampire, and the way that she's like, it's different. It's a very big sister thing to do, but also super, super frustrating.
Yeah. This is also the kind of stuff, though, that I feel I think that there is a lot to talk about with this sort of conversation about Buffy's mental health and how that plays out. I am reluctant to give the show too much credit for that, because part of why I hate season 6 so much is because I don't think that they dealt with it correctly. Like, I think they had a good idea that and then fumbled the ball. Like I just like
That's
cool.
like the motto for the show, though. Like,
Right.
they had every good intention, but it did not happen the way they thought it would.
True.
Indeed.
I think one of the reasons that it's really interesting too to talk about these episodes specifically is, for me, what Buffy did well a lot of times, and one of the reasons that it's so memorable to me is all of the ways that it had its kind of formula. And we were talking about Angel versus Buffy for a little bit before we actually started the podcast, but the way that Angel was very arc heavy and the way that Buffy had its arcs, but it still had these kind of like monster of the week and fillery episodes. But I think to me, Buffy was always at its best when it was like playing with something. So the themed episodes, anytime they messed with the credits, you know, the musical episode, the ones that had no sound, like those were the moments that I thought stood out especially. So it was really fun to get to sit down with 3 of these themed episodes. And just, even though it's like a range of quality here to me, is just fun to be like, okay, this is what Buffy does well, is, you know, this kind of like unconventional or like, you know, full of humor or mixing dark and light, like that brand of television.
We haven't even talked about Anya and her bunny costume.
Oh, God.
Funny.
It's like oh my gosh. One of the best moments of all 3 of these episodes is that the shot of Anya arriving at the party late, and they start, it's like a panning from the ground up of Anya in her big fluffy bunny costume, which I think is the seed. Is that the first time that we're introduced to the idea of Anya?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. All right, that's where it begins, the idea of Anya and her fear of bunnies. And it's just like such a beautiful moment. I love it so much.
She's even walking funny.
Like strutting.
And I've got to wonder about like where the bunny thing came from. Like it's such a bizarre like fear, and it almost feels like somebody in the writer's room must have had some fear of rabbits, or they knew someone. They're like, let's make her really afraid of something stupid. Oh, I know, you know, because I knew this guy that was afraid of bunnies. Or something.
Yeah, somebody. I knew somebody
up with that.
Everybody else is having their like existential dread inside the house, and here comes Anya clippity clopping in her bunny outfit.
Yeah, but which is to your point of the way that the show balances light and dark. That yes, it's in this episode. The fear itself is like a fairly dark episode for much of it, and obviously the ending, you have the humorous twist at the end, but you have moments like Anya in her bunny costume in the middle of it as well to help kind of ease the tension. And I think it definitely balances that very, very well, that you're sort of in it and you're stressed out for all your faves, and then bam, here's Anya in a bunny costume.
You know, I think that one of the things that we might be seeing too with the difference between All the Way and then Halloween and Fear Itself is the fact that there was such a significant change in terms of who was writing and directing the episodes between season 5 and season 6 because of the switch from networks. Like Halloween, I can't remember who wrote that. But I know Bruce Seth Green directed it. And then Fear Itself was David Fury. And then whoever wrote All the Way, it wasn't somebody who was normally writing for the show, I don't think. So I think that when they made those changes and those shakeups, I think that not only overall changed the tone of season 6 and season 7, but I think we saw kind of a decline in quality of writing.
We talked a little bit about as Sam mentioned, and I really enjoyed this point of view of like Willow's arc between the episodes and how you can see her going from like, you know, very insecure, can't even wear her Halloween costume, to, you know, plateauing with magic in the second Halloween episode. And then by the end, she's obviously abusing magic, and that very clear progression of her character. I'm almost hesitant to bring this up because I have such mixed feelings about this character, but I think Xander is the worst one. Like, he fares the worst in these 3 snippets.
Yes.
And so in the first episode in Halloween, he's got this whole like you know, his masculinity, his that whole whatever.
Well, and even before that, the first thing is him saying that like his relationship with Buffy is a solid foundation for future bliss. His whole like friend zoney attitude, whatever.
Right.
Yeah, it's nice guy bullshit. Yeah.
Yes.
And then he later tells Cordelia, you won't be able to break them apart. I know. Like, oh, come on.
Right.
And then progressing from that to like everything that's going on with Anya, and then looking at that with like future knowledge, I just thought that I don't know, it's such a good picture of every way that I struggle with Xander as a character.
Yes. Yeah, like here it is. Here's in 3 episodes. Here's why I really, really struggle with Xander. When I say struggle, I mean dislike. I do not like Xander as a character. I'm not. There's no struggle. I don't like Xander.
You know, like what really gets me too about Halloween specifically, and how he decided he was going to be this super buff and masculine army guy because he's so intimidated by Buffy's strength and by her power. So he's like, yeah, you know, I'm going to be this super tough army dude. And then it's like he's rewarded for that choice of toxic masculinity throughout the rest of the series. Because, there's something that has to happen. I know, because I once dressed up as an army guy for Halloween. You know,
I will say I enjoy that bit. I enjoy that as a bit. I appreciate one of the kind of constant grievances and back and forths that we had when we were recapping the show was just like the show like is not clear on its own rules. It never really got clear on its own rules. And in a way that I don't know, in a way that kind of always bothered me, just because it's like they used their rules to justify certain decisions, but then like the rules were different when they needed to do something else, and it was just like, then don't fucking say that that's how it works. So then whatever. Anyway, I appreciated the Xander gag just as a one of the show's meta jokes that like it did very well. That like we all know this doesn't fucking make any sense, and you're like winking at the audience like, yeah, we get it, this doesn't make any sense. And in this case, I appreciated it.
Yeah, it was a fun experience with me and the Xander thing as well, because when I originally watched the show, I was in 8th grade. That's when I like discovered the show. Yeah. So I have an interesting. I know that you guys like came to it later as adults. Like I saw it like live. You know, I recorded it on VHS. You know, like this is a serious thing. So like my first experience with the show was just purely out of fun, not out of like critiquing or analyzing it whatsoever. So I remember watching, you know, this show and really liking Xander as like when I was a kid, you know, and like he's so funny in his little jokes, and he's very like the witty jokes are funny, but I also have these moments where I'm like, I have that nostalgia for him, and then I'm like, but as an adult I just hate you. Like you're just so annoying. You are everything I loathe. And so it's just like really interesting for me, because whenever he'll say something funny, I'm like, haha, and I'm like, wait, I don't like you. So it's difficult. And there's just things that I notice that just with all the characters, honestly, like even just my feelings about Anya, or even my feelings about what they do with Buffy's sexuality, like with season 4 and the whole thing with Parker and whatever, like I just wasn't as aware of it on first watch, and my brain automatically like goes to nostalgia zone first, and I have to be like, wait, and analyze a bit. So yeah, it's kind of fun to be like watching these things and kind of having both experiences at the same time in a weird way.
Yeah, I just with Xander, it's like there's so much about him that I don't like, but there's so much about him that I find myself sympathizing with, in terms of like, especially in Fear Itself, he has this very similar post-high school experience to what I had, where he's all of his friends are going to college and he's not, and he feels like, okay, I'm the loser of the group. They're all going to forget about me. I remember feeling that very strongly. And so I can like sympathize with that. But at the same time, I go, man, I hope I wasn't as big an asshole as Xander was about all of this stuff. But I mean, like, you know, the whole thing with like growing up poor, that kind of thing, that I totally identified with all of that. And that at the same time went, okay, but that's not an excuse, because I'm not as awful as you are, I hope.
Yeah, I totally get that perspective. There are a lot of things. Like the idea of Xander is one that I appreciate. Like I understand like all of the themes that they try to sort of explore with him. I think like the sort of the best example of that is the conversation that he has with Dawn in season 7 about you know, her not, you know, when she thinks that she was one of the potentials, but then it turns out that it was a friend of hers. They have like a moment that sort of crystallizes that function that Xander often served in the show. And yeah, I appreciate all of that. I just there were just too many things, too many obstacles with Xander's masculinity issues, and also the fact that Nicholas Brendan just never looked like a teenage boy. This is always very clearly a grown-ass man being a petulant child. And like, that was just, yeah.
Looking back at the early episode, I was like, oh my God, baby. Even Giles, I was like, look at that baby. Nicholas Brendan, I'm like, look at that 30-year-old man.
right. Yeah, so, but whatever.
After we finished recapping, I've never watched another episode of Buffy ever, except for Fear itself. We like live tweeted that for some reason, like random, and then now these 3 episodes. So this is the first time I'm ever revisiting Buffy. So I think I say that I struggle with Xander just because I had my experience of him when we were recapping, but since then, like, I see people making good points about his character, so my brain is like, well, that's a good point, but I'm also so far removed from like consuming this. I think his thing is what Jenny was talking about, like, he's the everyman, so it's hard not to pick things in his characterization that you're like, I can relate to that. Yes, I am also this way or that way, but overall, just boo to Xander.
Well, I mean, that's why he's there, you know, to be the everyman and to be. But I think that he, in retrospect, seems more annoying to me, at least this, my experience is that he's more annoying and awful to me now that I have seen other Joss Whedon properties in which Xander is present in some form. There is always the character there who is the dorky, you know, not smooth with girls guy that is awful and sucks. And it's like in every single one of his things. So I don't. Yeah.
It's the Joss Whedon. He's the Joss Whedon. Xander is Joss Whedon.
Absolutely. And I think that now that I'm on to Angel recaps now, because I'm recapping episodes of Angel where they fall in the Buffy, like the way they aired or their chronology or whatever, Doyle seemed to start out very strongly like the Joss Whedon of that show. So I don't know that he actually necessarily gets replaced in that character thing, but I just felt like Doyle, I felt characters like Whistler, I felt all of those characters were just like what Joss Whedon's idea of being cool was or something. I don't know.
Even I would argue, and it's been a while since I rewatched this, but even Wash, like in Firefly, has a bit of that like Joss Whedon-y stand-in kind of like dorky but gets the girl kind of, I don't know, weird.
But the actor was able to sell it.
Yes.
Yeah. He was able, it was the actor's performance that made him endearing. If that had been Nicholas Brendan, it would have just been Xander again.
Right. You mentioned Angel, and we were talking about what a like bummer note the like Willow abusing Tara through magic as a note to end this on. I did also kind of add as my own like palate cleanser because I wasn't sure if we were going to talk about it, but the Angel season 5 episode Life of the Party, and like that was a very surreal watching experience because we recapped all of Angel, and Maria, I think, had this exact same experience of watching that episode, and there was like, I don't know, like 5 minutes in where I was like, I have no recollection of ever seeing this episode, and I surely spent several hours with it if we recapped it, but my brain was like, I don't fucking know what is happening. But there's like there's a turn where there's a mirror, and suddenly it clicked in my brain, and I was like, yeah, I think I know roughly where we're going. But going just this experience, because I, like Mari, have only revisited the show for the live tweet and then now for this. The recapping was my second time through it, but once we finished those recaps, I was like, yeah, I can take some time. I can have a breather from this show, and then I just sort of never looked back. But this was a really, I don't know, it was a weird and like weirdly emotional experience to go back and revisit all of these characters, and the music. Oh man.
Oh man, I am so there with you. Yeah, I actually tweeted out during this because I haven't rewatched Buffy in a while. Like, it's probably been years since I rewatched, because whenever I rewatched, I tend to go down a rabbit hole and watch all the first 4 seasons, and I'm just like, I don't have time for that anymore. So I don't even turn it on. But I started tearing up the first time I heard the theme song again, and I was like, you need to get yourself together. Like, this is ridiculous. But yeah, just even like, again, seeing them, and since I was going backwards, seeing them get younger was like like making me emotional.
Yeah.
And like, and just again, like I said earlier, where it's like, oh, you guys don't even know what it's gonna be like later. Like you're so yeah, and just like the tone of the different seasons and like the darkness in some of them and everything was just it was emotional experience for me for some reason as well.
I literally walked in on her crying like, I'm getting theory over these credits. It's like, oh my god, this was like, I don't know if this was before or after she was quoting the entire episode, but it was a while.
It was around the same time. Like it was really around the same time. Yeah, Mari walked in at like the worst time because it was when I was watching Halloween and I had been like waiting for this moment. Like I was like the whole day I was like, okay, we're starting out with the shitty season 6 that I keep forgetting the name of, and because I just don't care all the way.
Your brain just learns it and then deletes it immediately.
Exactly. And so like I was just like so hyped for it, and so like she walked in like halfway through Halloween and I just like, I'm just so happy to be here in this moment. Like it was fun.
Do you guys think that I know you just said that you don't have time but do you think that you will rewatch Buffy beginning to end ever again?
I don't think I'll watch it ever beginning to end because there's so many things that I don't like that I just don't want to relive. Like I don't have the emotional energy, but I own seasons 1 through 3 on DVD because I will like always have them around for if I ever want to like dip in and out of it. But yeah, like I just really personally, like I don't want to really relive most of like season 4 and 5. Parts of season 6 are difficult, but again, I have conflicting thoughts about season 6. I never really care to rewatch season 7, but I can see myself like dipping in and out and doing like the first half of Buffy like watches. That's a thing that I used to do a lot of, and I can see myself returning to during hard times.
I could totally see myself doing that. Not maybe necessarily sitting down and going, okay, now it's a project again. Like once I'm finished with my recaps, it's not going to be a project. I'm going to sit down and live tweet every episode because I hate myself. But right. I'm not expecting the recaps to ruin the show for me the way that I feared was going to happen, because I still, even though I work on these recaps and I go, man, you know, why? At first I thought, well, I'm going to be like, why should I want to watch Buffy now? Because I'll be doing it for no reason. I won't be doing it for work. But right. I think once I pass the recaps, I absolutely will be able to go back and watch it and enjoy it. But probably because of the amount of nostalgia that I have for the show, I probably will go through and watch it again, probably several times over the course of my hopefully very long life.
In the many years ahead.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'll be watching it in the nursing home.
I can't fathom I will ever do a complete watch through again. I mean, maybe I will, but it's a lot of episodes, first of all. So there's that. I would definitely go back to it piecemeal, I think. Recapping definitely has affected my relationship with the show in a sort of weird way. We've talked about this a lot around the internet in various places, but it was a lot of time spent with each episode, and then also that was sort of the most audience we had for the things that we were doing was when we were recapping Buffy, and so there was a lot of feedback on our feelings, and like, I don't know, feedback on the kind of feedback that we got on our feelings was not given to us in a way that was really gonna move me in any way other than like digging my heels in further, I guess.
Your feelings are wrong.
Right, yeah. Like, fuck you. I'm gonna feel that more. Right. Sort of the way that went down, basically. But yeah, so I don't know. So like it's complicated. Like me and Buffy, like I love it. It will always be something that I'm like, oh man, I love that show, but also it's like a very complicated love. So I could see myself going back to it in chunks. I think I still sometimes pull up our wrap-up posts to be like, how did I feel about like these episodes? I don't know. I ranked it 3rd for that season. I guess that means I liked it. Question mark? So maybe I would go through and watch like my top 5 favorite episodes from each season or something like that.
The experience of recapping, of looking at it closely, did not ruin this. It's that whole thing that you were talking about of just like watching it with other people ruined this.
Yes, other people.
But also because my first watch was a project, I don't know how to Buffy without Project. And so every time I'm like, okay, I could go back to this. I'm thinking, okay, but like, what can I do? Where can I talk about it? Like, am I going to have to go back and update my post with like new feelings and things of that nature? So that's what's always a little intimidating to me. Like, I wouldn't be able to just sit down and watch Buffy for the sake of like fun ? I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. But definitely tuning back in and watching for the first time since I had finished this, like there was a little bit of like nostalgia for the project and nostalgia for experiencing the highs and the lows of this. And, you know, when it gets it right, like episodes like Halloween and Fear Itself, like it's just something really, really special is a horrible word, but you know, special. And so kind of remembering that was nice.
I even had good feelings about Angel, which was weird because I in my head I'm like, I don't think I liked that show, but I was watching it and I was like, do I like this show? Was the weird experience that I had while watching the one episode of Angel that I watched. So I don't know what I'm going to rewatch now.
I'm going through that with Angel as I'm starting to recap it because I'm not deep into my recap of Angel, and I'm still having this thing where I'm like, I remember being totally psyched for this show. I mean, every week, like, being like, yes, Angel is on. This is amazing, and like it so heavily influenced my first published novels that I was just like, this is fantastic and amazing. And then, I don't know, like now I'm watching it. I'm like, how did I do this? Like, how did I sit? Why was I so excited for this? This is terrible.
Good luck. This Angel is 100% a show that is maybe not ruined, but is very difficult to recap just for the sake of looking at it closely. Like Buffy stands up in a lot of ways under a microscope. Like some of the, you know, plots and the dialogue aren't always great, but as a general rule, it stands up. Angel, the moment you pay too much attention to it, it starts to fall apart in pretty big ways. But I don't know, in retrospect, because you remember bigger themes and bigger moments or whatever, it lives in a happier place in my memory. It has some great characters and some great moments, but good luck to you recapping your way through it. We struggle bus so hard through that series.
Angel was even more that thing of good idea, terrible execution. I think good idea is true for really so much of what Angel did. There are fewer exceptions to the notion that like they were working with good ideas on Angel. Like I think that on the whole they were working with more like good ideas more often, but they just kept doing them in ways that I was like, why have you made these choices? Yes, having some distance from it, I can look at it with more this feeling of like, you were really trying some things. Like maybe you shouldn't have tried all those things, but I can respect that you were at least trying things.
I have some difficulty with Angel and starting watching Angel too, knowing the stuff that was going on behind the scenes now that it's come out, the way that Charisma Carpenter was treated, knowing that is a lot harder to watch some of the things that happened to her it's like, okay, well, you're taking out the way you feel about the actress on the character. And that's making it harder. I think that probably people who go to my blog will have noticed that since I started recapping Angel, it's like, okay, there's 2 Buffy episodes back to back. So those recaps come out like bang, bang. And then it's like, now it's 3 months since there's been one because Jen's trying to work on this Angel one, but she can't make herself watch the damn thing.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So my opposite feelings are that while I could not watch Buffy without a project, I'm more likely to sit down and just like binge watch Angel, just like trash watch it. Like I don't want to talk about it anymore. Like it's my feelings are my feelings. I don't want to look at it closely. That's something that I would like play in the background and go on a binge for, because that's what that show needs to be. Almost, it does have some bigger themes and things like that. But
let those bigger themes wash over you while you're like playing games or doing laundry.
Right.
You know what show did that better though? I feel like Angel was very much, if not inspired by, it was influenced by Forever Night. And
I don't know this show.
Okay, well, Forever Night it was a syndicated vampire show about a vampire detective who lived in Toronto, and he was friends with a coroner who was it was his love interest, and she was trying to cure him, but he worked the night shift because he told everybody he had that allergy to the sun thing. And so to atone for his past sins, he went out and helped people by being a detective and solving crimes. And so Angel is so similar in structure, there had to have been some sort of, and I'm not saying like, oh, it was copied, but there had to have been some sort of, that's a neat idea, let's put our spin on it. But Forever Knight really did it in a much better way that held up to the detective genre than Angel did.
Here's another thing you should watch instead.
Instead of that, watch this.
Well, thanks for listening to the podcast. I got us off on that whole weird Angel tangent after we were talking about our rewatching experiences, which totally would have been a like better and cleaner place to end this episode. But now we're going to end it in this abrupt and awkward way. Thank you guys so much for joining us this week. If you are enjoying this podcast, we would greatly appreciate it if you considered supporting us on Patreon, where we've got some bonus content and polls to vote on future things for us to discuss on the podcast. You can find out more information at patreon.com/SnarkSquad. We would love to hear all of your thoughts on this episode and on the Buffy Halloween episodes. You can find a post dedicated to this episode of the podcast, as well as any show notes at SnarkSquad.com, or you can find us on Twitter at Snark_squad. I am at Sweeney Says.
You can find me at My Name is Bunny Dis.
You can find me at Jenny_Trout.
And you can find me at Thoughts on Tomes.
Thank you again to both of you for joining us. Thank you, as always, to Stefan Chin for the delightful theme music that is playing us out right now. And we will be back again next week. Bye!